Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I was playing through Mario Galaxy 2 for kind of the first time. I'd watched my mom play through it when I was a really little kid, but I hadn't been able to play it myself since then due to the disc being broken. But I managed to buy a new copy from my local game store and ended up having a great time with it. However, near the end of the game in the final world, I entered a galaxy and was shocked. I want to show you what that experience was like for me, so I'm going to play a full run through of this level. Don't worry, I'll edit it down to just the important parts, but this is Slimy Spring Galaxy. That ending to me is one of the most memorable moments I've had in any game. Throughout my time with Mario Galaxy 2, I encountered a lot of weirdly atmospheric galaxies. I talked about this more in depth in my last video on this game, but a lot of this atmosphere is owed to the level's skyboxes, and this is also true at the end of Slimy Spring Galaxy, as you saw. However, unlike the galaxies I talked about in that video, this skybox isn't that unique. It may be beautiful, but it is just a normal sky. So to understand why this ending hits so hard, I want to first explain all the other details that add up to make this galaxy so incredible to me. So, when you enter the galaxy, you fly in from behind the camera, as you normally would. However, in Slimy Spring, you don't come from space like usual. You fly through what appears to be a massive cave, which then narrows into a small shelf where you begin your gameplay. This obviously doesn't really make sense with the way the game contextualizes traveling to galaxies, however, that's not out of the ordinary for this game. In this case, I appreciate the fact that you're not entering this cave from the surface. You're not entering a pipe that teleports you here. You instead get here from a much larger cave. It gives the feeling that this level is just a small part of a larger area, and makes it feel like this is just the end of a much larger adventure or expedition, which makes you think about what events transpired before you arrived here, and what things Mario saw earlier in the cave that you, the player, are not allowed to see. Now, onto the actual level. The area that you land on at the start plays a very unique role in the structure of the level that you only see in a few other galaxies in this game. It works as a kind of threshold, easing you into the rest of the level, and establishes the idea that you are about to dive even deeper into this cave towards unknown dangers, and you need to be ready for what you might find. I guess in that way, it's kind of like those little base camps cave explorers make midway through a descent to hold extra supplies and work as a place to put on scuba gear if that's necessary. And I guess cave diving is a good comparison, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing later in this level, which you could probably actually guess already given how absolutely soaked this room is. This water effect is created using some really cool scrolling textures, which for some reason there's a whole YouTube video about. Like, it has over 1 million views. I don't know, go check it out. But anyways, it creates this really interesting effect where the entire cave feels a lot more alive than most underground video game levels, and makes it feel a bit less made for humans, kinda like how I'd imagine an actual cave would feel. However, this feeling is immediately shattered by the clearly human-made entranceway leading towards the rest of the level. This is a pattern that you'll see throughout this galaxy. It overall feels like a natural cave, at the start at least, but certain sections appear to be specifically designed, and not even as a video game level. The design is very hostile to the player. For example, why does this doorway lead directly into a large drop? Like, surely there was a better way we could have been introduced to the level. But either way, let's jump in and see what we're dealing with down there. After we slip down this fun little water slide, we are deposited, with quite a large fall actually, into another cavern. Compared to the rest of the galaxy, this area is pretty much just what you'd expect from an underwater cave level. However, it is notable how much space there is above you, because that is very much not the case for the rest of the level. I also want to point out something that isn't actually that weird, but definitely helps complete the atmosphere of this cave. You'll notice how the ground is completely covered in this dark green moss. This connects back to what I was saying earlier about this cave feeling alive, and makes the enemies and obstacles here feel a bit more natural. Also this sign, I guess. We then enter a short tunnel taking us even deeper that introduces the first little bit of claustrophobia into this galaxy. And this continues into the next area, which... okay. I have avoided using the phrase liminal space so far in this video because it feels like a cop-out, but I do think it's the most succinct way of explaining how Slimy Spring Galaxy makes me feel. It's just like very empty, but not in the same way that a natural cave would be. Like I said earlier, a lot of this has to do with the man-made elements of the level, such as this passageway. This next area is the first section that had some kind of memorable gameplay for me. We are tasked with swimming up this very short, wide tunnel, which is kind of difficult to maneuver in. Like, the swimming in Mario Galaxy is already kind of frustrating to control, so you can only imagine how it feels to try and get through this narrow of an area while dodging these urchin enemies. The size and shape of this tunnel actually reminds me of some kind of drainage or storm protection system. This adds a kind of crawling through air vents aspect to this level, like we're in a part of a building that was not at all designed for humans, yet we can still technically fit through. Of course, this is definitely not actually a waterway due to it sloping back down later in the level and, you know, already being fully underwater, but I do think it is at least meant to evoke that kind of imagery, since there does seem to be a little crevice for water to flow through if this wasn't submerged. The rest of this section is pretty standard, with the exception, of course, of the scariest thing I've seen in my life. This is the only Subnautica 2 I need. We then approach a launch star, which is interesting. This whole level is based around a cramped tunnel, so how are we possibly about to fly through open space? As you saw earlier, we end up launching through what appears to be a giant canyon. However, if you look up or down, this is still just a massive cave, which is very cool and provides obvious contrast with the majority of the rest of this level. I especially like how if you look back at where you're launched from, it looks so small compared to the sheer monumentality of this cave. And we're not even above ground yet, this is still a cave. The platform we land on is similar to the opening to the level, as it's another intermediate platform. But this one doesn't feel quite as inviting as that one. As opposed to the natural cave with a lot of movement from the flowing water and bats, this platform is completely man-made with only a single paragoomba to keep you company. The design also doesn't really give you anywhere to stand, it only has a pathway leading you further into the level. So let's follow that path and jump in. But before we get to that part of the level, I need to take a moment to talk about this galaxy's music, which you will likely be familiar with, as I've been playing it ad nauseum for this entire video so far. I personally really like how this track borders being both beautiful and unsettling, and it feels almost similar to other Ghost House songs in Mario games, but it feels just different enough to gain a sort of otherworldly aspect. So fortunately, I am actually a musician myself, so you'd think I'd be able to give some sort of technical insight on what makes this song evoke this specific feeling. However, yeah. Anyone know how I can play a G7 flat 9 on this thing? But from my limited understanding of music theory, this song features what I believe are suspended chords, which have some dissonance to them that contributes to the overall atmosphere of this level, which is helped by some extra drone notes in the background. Correction, these are not suspended chords. I have no idea what kind of chords they are, but to me, they sound kind of dissonant, so take that as you will. The track also doesn't really develop much as it progresses, and it is incredibly repetitive, which in my opinion fits the liminality of this galaxy very well. Actually, now that I think about it, this is pretty much just Lavender Town, except hopefully this time it doesn't make you go insane. The rest of the level is mostly just one area. You are now in a fully submerged brick tunnel, which is obstructed by walls with small holes in them. The only obstacle here are the numerous boos, which, now that I think about it, is actually kind of an acknowledgement that this is pretty much a ghost house level at this point with how haunted it feels, which makes it fit in at least a bit better with the wider Mario universe. This is a cool section gameplay-wise, although it is very short, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about the random stone pillars with grass at the top of them, but I guess they're kind of a parallel to the patches of brick in the first half of the level. But then of course, we have the grand finale. You enter another very narrow and this time very long passageway, which leads you towards the exit to the cave. The only obstacles here are these urchins, which can actually be pretty difficult to dodge given the size of this tunnel and your limited air, but once you get past them, you finally surface and find yourself in, I don't know, heaven? I can't even properly describe how beautiful this place is to me. On its own, it seems like a pretty standard little grassy area, but for me it's the sheer isolation of this place that makes it special. It feels like one of those secret locations people have, where they have to take some elaborate path to get there and only show it to people they really care about. I guess a lot of that comes from the fact that this platform is so incredibly high above the ground that it might as well not be above a planet at all. I also have to give credit to the skybox here, which is yet another example of this game's memorable backgrounds. And here's something else that's cool. When you look back at the end of this level, the cave that you have been traveling through for this entire galaxy looks so small and insignificant, like it's just some random pool of water. Which reminds me, this level is called Slimy Spring Galaxy, which feels weird, right? Shouldn't this be called Slimy Cave or Tunnel Galaxy or something? Well, a spring is defined as a location where groundwater flows up to the surface into an above-ground pool, which is exactly what is happening at the very end of this level. That's right, I am fairly certain that this small, innocent-looking pool is the titular Slimy Spring. Hey, thanks for sticking with this video till the end. I know this one might feel a little esoteric for a lot of people, but I hope it can connect with at least some of you, and I'm not completely insane for caring this much about one level in a Mario game. Make sure to stay tuned for my next video, which will not be about video games. Unless I change my mind. But anyways, bye.